Excellent. Cool. So in terms of an agenda, we want to talk through just contextually what a deep label is and how it compares to other forms of labels. At this point, most of us are pretty well versed in terms of how to apply a label, what it looks like from a tactical standpoint, how to deliver it, and then we'll look to get some best practices from Derek in terms of maybe some go-to labels that could help you get a little bit deeper. And then looks like we have 3 or 4 people here that we can do a practice role play with.
All right.
Cool.
So you guys are probably functional in surface level labels, right?
Yep.
In every difficult conversation, every negotiation that you go into, anytime that you're in that conversation, there are going to be presenting dynamics or emotions, and then there's going to be latent dynamics or emotions. At this stage of the game, you guys should be really focusing on the latent dynamic or emotion. Surface level stuff, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. I tell you, I tell you that, my wife slipped off of the brake and hit the accelerator. She was pulling into the garage. And not only did we have damage to the car, we got damage to the house. And I just don't know. What's the presenting dynamic in that? How do you label the presenting dynamic?
Seems like you're frustrated.
All right. So that actually was more of a latent dynamic. The presenting dynamic is I'm angry with my wife.
Got it.
The presenting dynamic is frustration, maybe some confusion, maybe not knowing which way to go next, maybe not just clear on any of what the next steps would be. That's the latent stuff, because I never said any of that. But by virtue of the fact that you heard me say, I just don't know, that speaks volumes as to what is driving the statement. So in order to determine true motivation, in order to determine those latent dynamics or emotions, your question to yourself should always be, what else are they saying with that statement? What did they not actually say by using the words that they used? And I may have given you guys this example before, and if I have, I apologize, but it bears repeating. The car in 60 seconds exercise that you guys have seen probably hundreds of times by now. I want a car in 60 seconds or she dies. What's the latent dynamic or emotion the presenting dynamic or emotion? Then we'll talk about the latent. What's on top there? What's the surface level? What's the easy grab? I want a car in 60 seconds or she dies.
You sound desperate.
Sound desperate. What's the latent dynamic?
Scared.
Scared. Why would I be scared?
You don't know. The situation is outside of your control now, and you don't know what's going to happen next.
And because I don't know what is going to happen next, that produces the fear. The unpredictability is what produces the fear. And so those are two perfect latent labels. Number one, fear, but also what's driving the fear, the unpredictability. So labeling the latent emotions or dynamics would be labeling those two things, because those aren't things that I actually said. Those are things that you picked up on. Those are things that you inferred. Those are things that your intuition, your subconscious told you what was going on. And my hope for you, I would implore all of you, don't ignore the subconscious. Don't ignore your intuition. Your intuition is going to be screaming at you exactly what data you're picking up from the other side. That's usually not where we have a problem. Our problem is usually articulating what our subconscious is telling us, because we don't want to get it wrong, we don't want to offend them, or we don't want to look stupid. And so we have a tendency to not voice what our intuition is telling us. And the fact of the matter is that intuition is nothing but your subconscious. And your subconscious has kept you alive, kept all of us alive for thousands of years. When our gut starts to speak to us about the environment, we tend to make decisions relative to survival based on the data that we're getting from whatever we're faced with. So my point to you is, it hasn't let you down in the past. It won't let you down in the future. If you're picking up the data, you make an assumption about the data and test it by throwing a label on it. But you're always going to get more bang for the buck when you start to articulate the things that they are not saying. There's no clearer way to show that you're dialed in to your counterpart than when you start to label stuff that they haven't actually said. If I was a terrorist and I said to you, you're the first person to call us inside the crisis site, and I say, all right, here's the deal. I want Russian boots off of Chechen soil, and I want Vladimir Putin to resign. What's the presenting dynamic or emotion? You may say to yourself, the presenting dynamic or emotion is, well, it sounds like you don't like Vladimir Putin, right? That's almost verbatim what I said. That's labeling the presenting, but what's the latent dynamic or emotion? And really think about the statement. Slow yourselves down in the moment and ask yourself, what did that really mean? So I'll go back to it. I want Russian boots off of Chechen soil. Those are strong, strong words. They are camouflaging another message. What is that message?
There's some historical tension between the groups.
Okay. Go deeper than that.
Sounds like you're feeling oppressed.
Now we're getting closer. Historical tension is kind of dancing around the issue. Scott hit it right on the head. Sounds like you feel like you are oppressed. I never said I felt like I was oppressed, but based on the statement, that's what he derived from it. So he threw it out to test it. What if I wasn't trying to convey that I was oppressed?
You'd correct me.
The desire to correct is irresistible. So even if Scott gets it wrong, the desire to correct is so potent that I can't wait to tell Scott how he got it wrong. And by extension, I now make Scott smarter, because now he, instead of thinking that it was about oppression, he now knows it's about something else.
And you're also removing those steps of having to go continually deeper if you mislabel and they correct you, right? Because you're getting straight to the point of what the behavior is.
Yeah, you're more likely to get a candid and honest response to a mislabel because of that desire to correct. That desire to correct is so good. It feels so good that they wind up giving you information that they probably shouldn't. Now, did any of you go through the basic online course?
Yeah, I did the N9 and then the negotiating in crisis during the beginning of the pandemic.
Okay.
N9 with Sandy Hines.
So everybody's familiar with the N9, but there's also an 8-week course that we do, applying tactical empathy with success is what we called it. We'll call it now. We used to call it just the basic course. But in that course, we start talking about the importance of being able to go beyond the surface level and to dive a lot deeper into motivation. And it's going to require you guys to slow down. It's going to require you guys to take a pause, take a beat before responding, in order to really think about what actually is coming out of their mouth And more importantly, why? What's driving it? People make statements that don't make sense, and they ask questions that are stupid. And so before you respond to one of those statements that doesn't make sense, before you answer a question that's just a dumb question, find out where it's coming from. You talked about it earlier, Michael. What are the go-tos? Your go-to labels are, just remember this one. It sounds like you have a reason for, and then fill in the blank, whatever the action is. So if I were to ask you, Michael, what are you doing tonight at 5 when you get off work? Now, if I ask that question, what's going through Michael's head immediately? One of the first thoughts he has is, based on my response, how is my life going to change after 5 o'clock today? What is this guy? Where is he going with this? I'm not sure if I want to answer this. And so he's locked into internal dialogue with himself in a split second. So he doesn't know where I'm going. And he thinks he might be getting set up. So instead of responding, to the actual question itself, he's going to respond with a label. And that label is, it sounds like you have a reason for asking. And then the truth comes out. Well, my car's in the shop. I know you drive right by this place on your way home, and I was wondering if you would give me a ride. And Michael's thinking to himself, well, stupid, why didn't you just ask me for a ride? Why did you dance around? Because we all do it. We all, for whatever reason, I don't know what it is, discomfort, embarrassment, we all fail to ask the question that we really want the answer to. We ask question A, we want the answer to question B. And it's not just people who are new to the Black Swan method. Brandon and I got into a conversation one time, and you would think that we never partook in any of the Black Swan training. I asked him the question was, how many FBI hats do you still have at your house? Brandon responded to that question by telling me what he does to purchase the hats, who his contact is at the New York field office that goes into the FBI store to get the hats for him, how much it costs to ship them to his home, how he pays her or reimburses her via Venmo for the money that she put out for the hats. And they're all encased in carton in the basement of the house. And right now there are 2 cartons full, and they sit right next to the washer and dryer behind the bikes under a bookshelf. And I'm thinking to him, and he's thinking to himself, I'm hoping somewhere in there there's an answer that Derek is happy with. And I'm looking at him like he's crazy, because that's not what I asked him. I asked him how many hats he's still at the house. He didn't know why I was asking him that. And then once he started, and now at this point I'm glazed over, blowing spit bubbles, because he's giving me a lot of information about something I'd never asked about. And the reality is, I wanted to know how many hats he had, because I wanted him to mail one of the hats to one of the students who did a particularly bang-up job in the basic course. And instead of asking him, can you mail a hat to so-and-so, I said, how many hats do you have at the house? And because he didn't know where I was going with it, he threw a bunch of stuff at the wall and said, here, pick the response that you like. And so it happens to everybody. That's my point. And so your go-to labels should always be, that's my favorite one. It seems like you have a reason for whatever the behavior is, or whatever the statement is, or whatever the question is. Find out what the true motivation is, because you'll find that the question that they ask has nothing to do with what they want. And so that's a great way for you to get down into the weeds and figure out what's really driving the other side. What questions do you have about that?
How does that apply towards that specific go-to label. If you hear a response from somebody and you're really not picking up on anything specific emotion, can you apply that when you say it seems like there's a reason that you're saying that?
Yeah, that one is appropriate in every single conversation. Every conversation, there's a reason why they say or do or ask what they do. And so it doesn't matter what you're picking up on, but if you can't figure it out, find out via it sounds like you have a reason for.
Can you talk about how important the tonality is there and the delivery of that? Because I feel like if you deliver that in a different way, it could come off a bit.
Well, that's a good point. And the fact of the matter is, delivery is important in every skill that you exercise, because every skill that you exercise, I can make it sound like I'm being an assertive, aggressive jerk, or condescending, or a smart aleck.
Yeah.
So your delivery should be a foremost consideration on every single skill that you use. Because to your point, you know, if I were to say to you, sounds like you have a reason for saying that, that's not going to land very well. And so it's always going to be you being plaintiff, playing the role of the dummy. You know, it sounds like you got a reason for saying that. And that's and also, as I'm thinking about it, that's a great response to an attack. If they start leveling attacks at you, there's nobody on this planet, Black Swan trained or otherwise, that says you have to be victimized by anybody on the other side of the table. And so if I start to get inundated with an attack, whether it makes sense or not, I'm going to make them defend it. You want to call me a jerk? You want to say that I'm a thief, I'm incompetent, I'm greedy? All right, give me the evidence. Sounds like you got a reason for saying that. Find out if this attack is legit. You know, find out if there's some substance there, some evidence to back it up. Because at the end of the day, in any difficult conversation, you guys should be anticipating an attack. Anticipating that it's going to happen during the conversation. You won't be able to anticipate where. I mean, you may be able to narrow down that, you know, as soon as we start talking about price, I think emotion is going to go through the roof. But in any conversation where I want or I need, or in your head or in the head of your counterpart, you should be bracing yourself for an attack, a surprise attack, something that's going to come out of left field. It's not going to make any sense. It may not have anything to do with anything that you just said, but it's nonetheless there. And your challenge is to stay in the moment and go back to what we talked about earlier. Figure out what is the motivation behind that attack, because there is a reason for it. It's usually found in one of three places. They're attacking you because you're failing to hear something that they're trying to tell you. And the attack is a manifestation of the frustration they have with you, because somewhere during the interaction, they've been screaming at you about something and you failed to pick up on it. They're going to attack you. The second reason they'll attack you is they're under tremendous pressure on their side of the table, and you have failed to acknowledge it. You failed to be sensitive to it. The third reason that you will get attacked during a difficult conversation is people, I know this will surprise most of you, but people will do that to manipulate you, because they know that the attack will cause an emotional reaction on your part. They know that emotional reactions make you dumber. They know that emotional reactions make you uncomfortable. As human beings, when we are uncomfortable, what do we want more than anything else as fast as possible? And that is to get comfortable again, which is why you see so many people during an attack give in and they acquiesce and they start to capitulate and give away, compromise their position when they have no reason to do so. And so I know this is a little bit far afield when it comes to talking about latent emotions, but it's important for you with that label. Seems like you have a reason for saying, doing, asking, to determine which one of the three you're dealing with. More and more people find themselves pivoting out of that conversation. So Scott says something to me and I go off on Scott. Scott says, I like sweet tea, and I blast him and say, sweet tea is the worst crap on the planet. It's got to be unsweetened or no tea at all. Many people will say, whoa, that was a hot button issue. Not going to touch that anymore. And they spin away from talking about tea and they go somewhere else. Well, my negative emotion as it pertains to unsweetened tea is still there. Just because Scott moved away from it doesn't mean it's gone away. You can't get rid of that negative emotion or dynamic by ignoring it, explaining it away, or pretending it's not there. And this type of label, this go-to label, is a great way to ferret out truly where is that attack coming from. Welcome, Troy.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you. Gentlemen.
Great to have you. What about the go-to label? It seems like X is important to you. How have you seen that have an impact on getting to the why behind the behavior?
It's good to get it. It's effective at getting to the why behind the behavior, because the mere fact that they mentioned it in the conversation means it carries some weight with them. And those things that are important, those things that we value, we as Black Swanlings are searching for every opportunity to demonstrate that we're listening on a deep level. And so when you pick up something in the conversation and your label is, it sounds like X is important to you, we have fulfilled that need from the other side. And it feels good because Michael picked up on the fact that, being a critical thinker is important to you. Well, if he says that to me, and that is truly important to me, what am I going to do with that label? I'm going to expound on the importance of critical thinking for me. If it's not that important, going back to the drive to correct, being irresistible, I'm going to tell him, no, it's not critical thinking that's important to me. It's other intellect and problem solving qualities that I'm looking for. Well, now Michael's gotten the real issue, but as a go-to, that would be my third favorite as a go-to. My first two are, seems like you have a reason for asking, seems like you have a reason for saying that. And the third would be, it sounds like X is important to you. Because the mere fact that they bring it up in the conversation is a clear indication that it is of importance. So that's great at getting latent dynamics or emotions onto the table, motivations onto the table or into the discussion.
So those three right there are a form of preparation, right? It's having those within your utility belt.
Yeah.
What about if you're coming into a business conversation? You should know who your audience is. You should know what they care about. You should know what challenges they have. How can you start to anticipate what they might say based off of what your goal is on the conversation?
That's an interesting way you put that. Anticipating what they might say based on your goals. You're going, all right. So first of all, if you guys aren't role-playing your conversations prior to going in, you're doing yourself.
So guys, you know which room you're going to? Okay.
Sorry.
Oh man, you threw me, Daniel. What was I saying?
I don't know, but I have a tough $1 million question for you about your book.
All right, hold on one second.
Okay, so you were saying if you haven't role played.
Oh yeah, you guys are doing yourself a disservice. That should be a part of your prep. But you need to understand that best laid battle plans never survive first contact with the enemy. You know, Mike Tyson said everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth, and then it's over with. And the problem with over preparation is that your drive is going to be one to prepare for every contingency, and you can't. You can't, because I don't care how much prep you do. I don't care how much research you've done. I don't care how long the relationship has been around. There are things that are going on with your counterpart that you're only going to uncover as a result of the conversation. That's just the way. That's just the way that it is. So do your best to anticipate. Come up with some prompts beforehand. But don't be so married to your game plan that you're not flexible enough to switch when the demand has been recognized or the need has been recognized.
Right. That idea of flexibility, I think, is important. Also, I think that video that you guys released today on sequencing, I think that was really valuable, to not get married to a certain sequence of tactics and skills, right? It's knowing how to apply them in certain situations, but also being dynamic and flexible within the moment, and really leveraging the surrendering yourself to listening to be able to know where to go and to use your intuition.
That's right. And it doesn't create pressure for you, because all you have to do is sit back and listen. You know, I use this analogy all the time. It's in the game of baseball. How great would it be? I mean, remember as a kid when you would play sandlot ball or play on a little league team, and you thought to yourself, how cool it would be if I could just be at bat all the time. Well, in essence, that's what you're doing with this stuff. You're at bat all the time, and you pick and choose the pitches you want to swing at. And so there's no pressure on you for having to think of what to say next, because they're going to tell you if you just take a pause, get out of your own head, and just really listen and go back to what we talked about at the top of the hour. Why did he just say that? Why did he just do that before responding? If you take that 1 to 2 seconds to consider that thought, you'll be much more prepared coming up with the right response.
Well, I've asked a ton of questions. Anyone else have?
Daniel's got $1 million question.
Yeah, let's hear it.
First of all, I am honored to have you here, and thank you for reading your Audible book. And I'm assertive. I like long walks on the beach. My question is, on your book, it sticks with me that you say labeling negatives is worth 3 times than labeling a positive.
Yes.
And I've been so clinged on to that, and I'm wondering, has there been any changes to that ideology? I've been practicing. I do like it. It is tougher. Any changes or anything on that?
There hasn't been any changes because there really hasn't been any change in the human nature response. The human nature response remains the same. The human nature response dictates that negative emotions, negative dynamics drive decision-making and behavior, period. And as a result, you're always going to get more bang for the buck in labeling negatives. Why is it 3 times more powerful? Because you're clearing their brain up. You're making them smarter. Labeling a positive, them smarter. Labeling a positive reinforces things that work for you. Does nothing for the psyche of the counterpart, which is why we say it's 3 times more powerful. You can label all the positives you want. If you label positives, you know, if you say to them, for example, based on what we just talked about, it sounds like you want a partner you can trust. And in their mind thinking, you guys are untrustworthy, you're incompetent. I don't even know why we agreed to take this phone call in the first place. That's the state that they're in, and they are actually not as smart as they would otherwise be. So it's very important for you to make your counterpart as smart as you possibly can. And that starts with you labeling negative as they.
I think my aha moment on there is that labeling a positive results in a yes answer. When you label a negative, it typically results in a no answer where they feel control. Is that the secret? to it?
But not necessarily, because you could label a negative. You could start out and say, you guys are probably thinking that we're just trying to be. Yes, you're damn right. That's what we think about. That's what we're thinking about. Well, that's a yes response. You're not getting a no response, but it carries more weight because you've gotten to the crux of an issue that clearly is a prominent one for them. Now, labeling the positive, of course, you're looking to get that yes, because the labeling of the positive solidifies your position, it strengthens your position, and how do I want to say this? I want to say this delicately. It obligates them. Now they're starting to get a sense of obligation, because at some point you're going to make your ask during that conversation. And the ask needs to be responded to in a manner that is consistent with the positive label that you gave earlier in the conversation, because people want to be consistent in word, in thought, and in action. And you saying to them, it sounds like you want a partner you can trust. And they say, of course, or yes. After you've gone through the rest of the conversation and you get to your ask, they're less likely to push back against you, because they've already said that they trust you. They confirmed that trust with responding to a yes to the label that you laid out in regards to trust. Does that make sense?
It does. And it seems that, that becomes the yes momentum, which you get the yes and you get the result there. However, what I've been learning is when you get the no's up front and the yeses towards the end, there's a lot more commitment from your counterpart.
Yeah, so you're starting to mix a couple of different concepts. So to provide some clarity, your yes is worthless. Yes without a how is worthless. And so you guys want to test the yes you get, depending on the person you're dealing with, minimum of 3 times. So I say to you, Daniel, all right, great. We've resolved the issue here. I'll get it to you next week. That's the first yes. You need to hit that at least twice more to ensure implementation is going to be realized. And you do that with labels. You do that with mirrors. You can even do it with a paraphrase, but you need to hit it at least 2 more times to have me publicly promise to get whatever I promised or I said I would to you next week. So I say to you, all right, all this looks great. I'll have something on your desk by next week. Your label to that to ensure that I'm more likely to commit to it should be, so it sounds like next week works better for you. Nothing more complicated than that. And I follow that on with, I gotta run it by my folks, and then at some point I'll send you an email and let you know when to expect it. So it seems like if you go back and talk to your folks, you guys will come make a decision, and then Tuesday or Wednesday I'll get an email from you telling me when I can expect whatever it is that I promised. And I give you a yes or that's right. That's your third test. You're on pretty good ground. Why are you on pretty good ground? You forced me to verbalize a commitment to you. Going back to what I talked about earlier, people want to be viewed as consistent in word and thought and action. And 3 separate times, you ask me about the same thing to generate a yes about the same thing. And this is not to be confused with yesable propositions. It's not to be confused with yes momentum. It's not any of that stuff. That yes momentum academic stuff is garbage. It's garbage. It says that you get the counterpart to say yes to a bunch of different things that have nothing to do with the conversation, and they're more likely to say yes to the big ask when you get to the end. The problem with that is when you start peppering me with yes questions,
Looks
It
like you
me, huh?
He freezes when he gets peppered with yes questions.
did. So you're freezing up, Derek.
Oh,
So
how
I
about
said it sounds like you freeze up when you get the yes questions. That's what I'm saying. It's crazy. You're still freezing up. So one of the things that happens when you keep getting the yes questions, like Derek was saying, is go ahead, Derek.
I don't know what's going on here. I got a gremlin in the mat.
Fortunate.
So what happens is when you keep getting the yes questions, you're going to be less trusting. First of all, secondly, you're going to get tired of hearing the yeses. You're going to say, you know what, this is not working. How many times have y'all been pressed for so many yeses that you don't even want to talk to the person anymore?
Well, that's why I mentioned it. I got a sales guy call me, and it was a lot of yeses, and I did said yes because he asked me if I like veterans. I'm a veteran. I said, well, yeah. And he's like, so you want to participate in this? I'm like, well, yeah. And I gave him the $50 per month, and then 3 months into it, I'm like, why did I say yes to that? I didn't really mean it, so I canceled it and ignored the guy.
Typical. That's a typical response. You realize that you didn't really want to do that, and it put you in an awkward position in the moment. You're muted, Derek.
I think I'm back.
Yeah, you are.
So as an analyst, you start hitting me with a question right off the bat of, do you have a few minutes to talk? Now I'm already on guard because I know you're driving for yes. And that's the problem with the yes momentum. People feel it. They feel it and they resent it because they know you're taking them somewhere. And I don't want to be taken anywhere that I haven't volunteered for. And so the yes momentum, the yesable proposition is all predicated on the fact that you need to get multiple yeses to the same thing. Some people in academia even call them yes tie downs. Are you serious? Does it sound voluntary if you're tying your counterpart down? What about that screams they're doing it of their own volition? You're using yes tie downs on your counterpart and you think they like it, or you're having them used on you and you think and you like that? Of course you don't. And so don't confuse the rule of three, which is what we just talked about, where you're shoring up the agreement with yesable propositions or yes momentum or momentum selling or any of that. And so understand that you should not get excited with the first yes that you get because it's going to burn you. If you don't test the implementation, it's going to burn you. You guys have been doing business long enough. How many times have you gotten a yes and 3 weeks later you figured out it was a no? And in fact, I think, who was the veteran? Daniel was just talking about that, right? He felt obligated and pressured, and so he acquiesced. And he had no intention, or maybe he did it at the outset, but after he thought about it for a while, he was like, I'm not doing this. And I'm sure during the conversation, the guy that you or woman that you were speaking to got that yes from you, and they felt really good about themselves and never bothered to test the implementation with you, because had they probably would have uncovered the fact that you really weren't going to do it anyway. So just be very cautious of that.
When you look at through the lens of agreement, it makes much more sense than just getting someone to say yes. So
yes, yeah.
I think also what jumped out to me was when you can apply the rule of three is when you're talking about next steps with somebody, with your counterparty.
Exactly. Exactly. When you start talking about next steps, that's a great one. All right. So what are the next steps? Just simply asking a calibrated question. What are the next steps? Or if you're more beholden to a label, as I am, it seems like you got an idea of what the next steps should be. What are we going to do if we're off track? Seems like you got a plan for getting us back on track if we find ourselves off track. And now you're just getting them to commit. You're getting them to commit, so that when it ultimately comes time to produce, they're more likely to do it. Now, I will tell you that even with talking about implementation, I said at least 3 times. Well, I said at least 3 times because with the accommodator, it's probably going to have to be 5 to 7 times, because the accommodator is going to, I won't say that they're going to lie to you. The accommodator is going to lie to you to keep you happy in the moment. And an accommodator, if you pegged your counterpart as an accommodator, you better test that agreement 6 ways to Sundays before you get off the phone with them, or you get off a call with them, get out of the room with them, because they will tell you exactly what you want to hear in the moment. And they know they have no intention on executing. One kid told us, you can't believe everything that we say, but we're not intentionally trying to lie to you. And I'm like, what do you, that? And he said that was probably 10 years ago that this kid said that. And I still can't get my head around that. You can't believe everything that comes out of our mouth, but we're not intentionally trying to lie to you. And with, I know you guys wanted to talk about deep labels, but all of this kind of revolves around each other. So when you're talking about negotiator personality types, people often think, and I'll ask this question of the students in the class, I'll say, what's the most problematic personality type? Conventional wisdom says the assertive. And the reality is the assertive is the easiest, because all you got to do is shut your mouth and let them talk, because that's all they want to do anyway. But with the accommodator, we have seen over and over again, they are the most problematic. They will walk you right up to the edge of the minefield and not open their mouth, not say a word, knowing that your next step could be your last. And we've seen it externally. We've seen it internally with this company. And nobody on staff right now, but we've had it in the past where they wanted to keep everybody happy in the moment. So they kept everybody in the moment in the dark. They treated everybody like mushrooms. You know what I mean by that? And when I say treat them like mushrooms,
Yeah.
They treated us like mushrooms in the fact that they kept us in the dark and they fed us shit all the time.
Gotcha. I like that. So it sounds like different negotiator types are going to be impacted differently by labels. From the accommodator, if you throw a label out there and you get basically like a very short yes answer,
you're not going to get that from an accommodator. You're not going to get that from an accommodator. The accommodator is going to be flowery. I can't even say that word. They're going to be robust in their response. They want to share. They want you to know what's going on. And so you ask an accommodator, how are you today? Well, I hope you carved out 15 minutes, because they're going to go through exactly how wonderful or how terrible their day is going. You're more likely to get a one-word answer from somebody like me, an analyst, because I don't like you asking me questions. And so I know a label can be used as a question. So if you pepper me with a lot of those, you're going to get a defensive response. And the defensive response is going to be, yep, nope, yep, nope. That's what I just said. And what I'm telling you there is I don't yet trust you to engage in a more substantive response. And so your response to that should be, you should be thinking to yourself, why doesn't this guy trust me? What is it about me that he views as a threat? And that's what you need to go after with the one-word answer people. Don't get wrapped around the axle that they're only giving you one-word answers, because even those one-word answers are screaming at you something else, and that something else has to do with trust. You know, I hear it all the time. People say, yeah, the labels didn't work. What do you mean they didn't work? Well, I labeled them and he gave me a one-word answer. I didn't know where to go from there, so I stopped labeling. I said, yeah, he's giving you a one-word answer because, again, let's go back to it. We've been talking about it now for 50 minutes. Why is he giving you one-word answers? Why would anybody give you a one-word answer? Because they don't trust you with anything more than a one-word answer. So the question is, why don't they trust you? Why are you viewed as a threat? Until you determine that, if you're viewed as a threat, meaningful dialogue is not going to take place. And so instead of getting wrapped around the axle that they're only giving you one-word answers, figure out where it's coming from. But going back to your earlier statement, labels, mirrors, and dynamic silence are the preferred skills by all three negotiator personality types. When we asked them which skills work best with you, all three of them said labels, mirrors, and dynamic silence. You're just going to get different responses depending on that type.
Would it be a bad idea to throw that label out there? It seems like I pose a threat to you, or it seems like you don't trust me, something of that nature, if you're getting those one words.
Yeah. So it seems like on some level I'm making you a little defensive. Seems like on some level you're not trusting me. And then follow it on with a calibrated question. If they don't expound, what's causing that? This is an overt attempt at you trying to understand their perspective. And the fact that you picked up on the one-word answer as indicating a lack of trust is huge, because most people are chomping at the bit. Well, the assertive and the analyst will be chomping at the bit to tell you why they don't trust you. The accommodator is not going to give you that one-word answer, but the other two they're chomping at the bit. And the fact that you did enough with the label to unscrew the lid on the jar, which means the sauce is going to be easier to pour.
I like that. Troy, you talk about staying curious. What do you do before a negotiation to put yourself in that mindset? Do you, is there any sort of gratitude, affirmations? Do you watch a video? What helps you get in that mindset?
I usually talk to someone that I trust. You don't want to talk to somebody that's going to be negative. If they're negative, all they're going to do is exacerbate the situation, because they're going to tell you, yeah, you need to tell him, and they're amping you up. And you don't want to go into a conversation revved up already. You want to have a conversation with somebody that you trust and say, these are the things that I'm concerned about. This is what I'm worried about them saying, or how I expect them to behave. And they're going to give you feedback, positive feedback, and say, you know what, Troy, listen, stay curious, use the skills, the labels, the mirrors, the dynamic silence. You know what you're after, the black swans. And they're going to get you prepared mentally to have that conversation. Once they do it, you're going to feel comfortable going into the meeting. Just like Derek says, you can have the best laid plan, but once the meeting starts, boom, you get punched in the face right away. You're going to have to take a step back and take a breath and get your thoughts together. And if you're going in there with a bunch of baggage already, you're not going to do that. So clear your mind, listen to people that you trust, run it by them. If you don't have anybody to run it by, look at yourself in the mirror. Say, hey, how am I going to behave in this? And then when you start seeing your facial expressions, you'll know if that's the one you need to do or something you need to work on. If somebody punches you in the face and you start asking, why are they doing that? Why are they behaving this way? Every time you say that, it's going to bring you down a little bit. But if you say, hell no, I'm going to get back at him, I'm mad at him, I'm going to attack back, it's going to be two dumb people in the room.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing is, as a part of Troy's prep that he didn't mention, is you guys, it goes back to the motivation thing. Assume you got something to learn in every conversation. You, for example, you and Daniel may converse on a regular basis. But if you sit down and talk with Daniel in a difficult conversation or a negotiation, there are things that are going to come out in that conversation that they wouldn't otherwise, that you wouldn't otherwise discover. The easiest way for you to do that is to go in there with that mindset going, I don't care how long I've known this guy. There's something going on his side of the table that I have no clue about, because we all hide information. We all hide it. And so you're going into the conversation with incomplete information, which means what for you? You got to be careful about your goal and objective. You know where you would like to end up at the end of the conversation, but don't be so married to it that you're not able to pivot based on what you learn. When you guys make up your mind where you want to end up at the conclusion of a negotiation, you have made up your mind knowingly and intentionally based on incomplete information. Because I know Busaletto hides information. You know how I know he hides information? Because I hide information. And if I'm hiding it, I know he's doing it. And so I can't say that after I talk to Busaletto, this is where I want to end up, because I may learn something during the course of the conversation that changes where I want to end up. So keep your mind open. The other thing about being curious is it'll prevent you from getting triggered in the conversation. When that attack comes, to Troy's point, if you're curious, you're not going to fight back. If you're curious, you're going to say, where the hell did that come from? And it'll help you to stay grounded, because the easiest default is to fight back. If you're Troy, you're going to fight back. That's his easy default. If it's me, I'll pack up my stuff and leave. I got no time to engage in combat with somebody. That's a waste of time. I'll go talk to somebody who wants to talk to me. But stay in the moment, stay seated, and figure out where it's coming from. Assume that you have something to learn, and it'll prevent you from getting triggered, because your brain doesn't work like that. You guys cannot be curious and pissed at the same time.
Okay. Can I just ask one more question? I know, Troy, for you, no-oriented questions and labels are your two that you would take with you. Derek, what would be your top two tools if you can only use two of them?
Gun to my head, if I could only use two, it's part of a quick 2+1. I'm limited to two. If I had to only use two, labels and dynamic silence. If I could only use two, it would be labels and dynamic silence. I'll sacrifice mirrors. Mirrors are more of an attending and listening technique. It's more of a check-in from my perspective. You just get so much more information, valuable information and data from labels and mislabels and then shutting your mouth than you do with any of the other skills. So I would say labels and silence for me.
Also, an accusation audit effectively is labels and dynamic silence.
10-4, sir. That is correct.
Asking label.
And asking labels, yeah, asking labels. It's something that we've been putting a lot more focus on now, because you reduce the chances of offending the other side. I am more responsive to an asking label than I am to a direct question. I anticipate your direct questions, and even in my anticipation stage, I don't like them. And then when you hit me with them, I'm the guy. I'm that guy that's going to hit you with yes, no. That's what I said. Of course, because I don't want to be peppered. But the same question that I have, the same calibrated question that I would have a defensive reaction to, 2 millimeter shift, you change it into an asking label, and all of a sudden I'm freaking answering the question, and it's like magic.
Is that because assertives get triggered by calibrated questions that aren't very calibrated?
No, I'm an analyst. I get triggered by calibrated questions because I don't, I'm going to explain to you how I got to where I got under my own terms. It's not going to be prompted by you asking me a direct question. Flip side of that, the assertive, they love questions because it gets them a chance to tell you how smart they are. It's the analysts that you have to be careful with that get defensive and you run the chances of shutting them down if you pepper them too much. But again, it's just a small mental shift. You want to ask me, Derek, what time will you be dropping into the party tonight? Change it to an asking label. Sounds like you have a time in mind and when you're going to arrive. Totally different from me. So just keep that in mind as you're pondering how to deal with each of those types. But the asking labels, yes, that is a part of the labels that are my favorite.
Amazing. Well, we've come to the top of the hour. So much gold that Derek has shared with us, Troy has shared with us. Thank you so much, Derek. Thank you so much, Troy.
Of course.
We have this.
When are we doing this again?
So I think we want to talk about leadership next time. I know you're the leadership guru. So I'm going to work with Jay to get that on the calendar.
10-4. Looking forward to it, guys.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody.
All the best.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.